So you'd like to learn about Mamba and controlling virtual environments in Python. But what is a virtual environment? So when you get started in coding in Python, you tend to think of your setup like this. So if we take this box to represent my laptop, what I've done is I've installed Python on there. And for a time, that's fine. I'm coding away, creating new applications and new data science projects. Now, a virtual environment can be thought of as a box on your computer that contains a version of Python. So for example, here we've got an environment called base. And in that base environment, I've installed Python 3.1.2. And I've also got NumPy and Pandas, version 2-ish of both of them. So what's the advantage of doing this over and above just installing Python on your machine? Well, you can think of this in terms of projects and time. So projects is useful to think about because for each project we work on, we're likely to need different packages installed. So here we've got two example projects that are both installed in these virtual environment boxes on my machine. We've got one for time series analysis, and in addition to NumPy and Pandas, I've also got skTime installed. And then I've got one for machine learning. And in machine learning, as well as NumPy and Pandas, I've got PyTorch installed. Time comes into it because you'll see there's different versions of Python and different versions of packages installed across these projects. Now that's because an environment can also act as a reproducible time capsule where we have a specific set of packages pinned to versions for the project that we're working in. So why is that important? Well, let's imagine that next week I need to rerun an uber important project on my laptop. Now, I'd originally conducted this analysis on my desktop at work. And so what I'd like to do is recreate the software environment that I have at work on my home laptop. And so a virtual environment allows me to do that this week, next week, or even 10 years from now. And I can get the exact same versions of Python, NumPy, Pandas, and PyTorch installed in my uber important project. And I can do that by specifying my environment in text form in what's called an environment file, an environment.yml, which stands for yet another markup language. And I can use a piece of software called Mamba to install all of this software into my environment, my box on my computer called uber import proj, from an online repository called Conda Forge. So why am I using Mamba instead of the probably more well-known software Conda? Well, what I can say is these two pieces of software are effectively equivalent. So Mamba is a drop-in replacement for Conda. But what I would encourage you to do is adopt Mamba for your analysis in data science above Conda for 4 reasons. The first is speed. So Mamba is much faster than Conda, particularly for complex software environments. And whereas Conda may take minutes, tens of minutes, an hour to install complex environments, Mamba will install it in seconds or a few minutes. The second reason is to do with the licensing of Mamba versus Conda. So Mamba is free and open source software through and through. It uses a permissive open license, the BSD3 license. It's very straightforward. You can use it for commercial applications. You can use it in any size organization. You can use it for research. No questions asked. Now, Conda's licensing is more complex. So Conda is developed by the Anaconda company, and there are limitations on what you can use it for, particularly if you're in a large organization. Be warned, it is not free and open source software in the truest sense. So Mamba and Conda can also install from Conda Forge. Now, Conda Forge is the community channel, the community repository of all software packages in Python that you might need to install. Mamba uses that only. Conda from Anaconda uses the defaults channel and optionally Conda Forge. And then lastly, installation. So if you install Anaconda, what typically beginners use from the Anaconda website, that installs a very large base environment on your computer to help you get started, to be fair. Whereas if you install Mamba, you'll use MiniForge and you'll install a much smaller base environment on your computer, and you can get into the habit of creating a virtual environment per project that you're working on. So let's have a go at creating a Mamba virtual environment. So once you've installed Mamba on your computer, you'll see that by default you're in the base environment. So this is installed Python 3.12.6 on my computer, and it's packaged by Conda Forge. If I wanted to create a new virtual environment, a new box on my machine, I would issue a Mamba create and then you give a name for the environment, and you might install Python 3.11. So that's found the packages that it needs to install. I just need to confirm that I would like to install. So I say yes, and it downloads the packages for me. Now it's given some instructions on how to activate that environment with Mamba activate Uber. So we'll type that in. And we've now switched over from our base environment to our Uber environment. So if I take a look at Python now, I'm running Python 3.11.1. So I've switched the box that I'm looking at to look at only a project-specific box for Uber that contains Python 3.11. Now I may want to install additional packages in there. So for example, I could issue a Mamba install command and install NumPy 2.0.2 and Pandas 2.2.3. And again, what Mamba has done is it's gone away and it's found the packages that it needs to install to make that work. So I just say yes, and it downloads that to my machine. Now, alternatively, what you might like to do is install directly from an environment file. So I've got one of those on my machine here that we can take a look at. And we can see that we've got an environment file called environment.yml on my machine. It contains an environment called project2. It's going to install everything from the Conda Forge channel. And the dependencies that have been specified are Python 3.1.2, NumPy 2.2.0, and Pandas 2.2.3. So to create that, I can issue a Mamba env create f environment command. So that is basically telling Mamba to create a new environment, and we're going to read that in from the file environment.yaml. So that will collect that package information and install it. And there we go, it's created. That took a few seconds. So we can now Mamba activate project 2. So that's it. That's a quick introduction to creating Mamba environments and managing them in Python. Thank you for listening this long, and I'll see you next time.